During the Second World War, if you were a German soldier, the moment you surrendered wasn't the end of your fight for survival. No, it was actually the start of a lottery. A lottery where the prize wasn't cash, but your own life. And the winning ticket all came down to a simple accident of geography.
Just think about that for a second. We tend to imagine being a prisoner of war as one single awful experience, but the reality? It was worlds apart. A soldier's fate, his chance of ever seeing his home again, it all hung on one simple question: who captured you?
To really get a grip on just how different these experiences were, we're going to follow the true stories of two German soldiers, Adalbert Hohl and Gerhard Eriksson. Their journeys as prisoners began just 3 months apart, but they might as well have been on different planets. Their stories reveal one of the most powerful and telling contrasts of the entire war.
I mean, just listen to the sheer terror in Adalbert Hohl's words there. This isn't just a military surrender for him. It's like he's descending into hell. He knows the battle is over, but he can feel in his bones that a new, maybe even more terrifying, struggle is about to begin. And that dread, it was completely justified.
And then, there's this. You can almost feel Gerhard Eriksson's complete and utter shock. He's bracing for hatred, for cruelty, maybe even a bullet. Instead, he gets water and chocolate. This wasn't just a small act of kindness. It was a profound signal that the world he was entering was going to operate by a completely different set of rules than anything he could have possibly imagined.
So, that moment of capture really set the tone. But it was the journey from the battlefield to the POW camps where these two worlds truly split apart. For one group, it was a death march. For the other, an unbelievable voyage. For the men captured at Stalingrad, the journey started as a literal death march. Soviet guards would systematically strip them of any warm clothing, greatcoats, gloves, and especially boots. In that brutal Russian winter, a pair of boots was everything. The march itself was designed to kill. If you resisted, you were shot. If you collapsed from exhaustion, you were just left to freeze. And if you somehow survived a march, this is what came next. Unheated cattle cars, jammed so full of starving, freezing men that many of them died standing up. One survivor, Walter Ward, said his transport group lost over 1,000 men just on the train journey alone. Death was a constant, ever-present reality.
Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, a completely different reality was playing out. German prisoners were sailed to the U.S. on the exact same Liberty ships that carried American GIs to Europe. They had bunks, they got 3 hot meals a day, they had doctors. It was so orderly, so humane, that it totally contradicted everything these men had been told about the Americans.
So this brings up the obvious question: why? Why on earth were these experiences so radically different? And the answer isn't just about having more or less food or better trains. It goes deeper. It's about two fundamentally opposed national philosophies, two ideologies, clashing over the fate of their captured enemies.
Let's break it down. For the Soviet Union, the guiding principles were revenge and economic extraction. The prisoners were seen as an extension of the Gulag system, an expendable labor source to rebuild the country their army had destroyed. But for the United States, the approach was guided by law and democratic values. They operated under the rules of the Geneva Convention, which meant prisoners weren't just a resource to be used up, they were a legal responsibility.
And these huge philosophical differences, they translated directly into the day-to-day reality inside the camps. For a prisoner, this meant the difference between a life of constant, desperate survival and a life of predictable, structured security.
You know, maybe nothing shows the difference as clearly as food. Just look at this. In American camps, prisoners got about 3,300 calories a day. That's the same amount their own soldiers got. In the Soviet camps, even if you were a working prisoner meeting a brutal quota, you got a starvation diet of 1,200 calories. That's less than what a person needs just to stay alive without doing any physical work at all.
The labor told the same story. In America, it was regulated work. You got paid, you had 8-hour shifts, Sundays off, safety rules. It helped with labor shortages, sure, but it also kept prisoners busy and healthy. In the USSR, work was punishment, plain and simple. It was about squeezing every last drop of labor out of a man before he inevitably died.
And here we come back to Adalbert Hall's words, painting this absolutely devastating picture of total dehumanization. It wasn't just about hardship. It was the systematic destruction of the human spirit, a place where the living had to scavenge from the dying just to survive another day.
Now, just listen to this contrast from another soldier, Hans Fehr. It could not be more extreme. He's saying the prisoner of war barracks were better than the facilities in his own army. Each man with his own bunk, hot showers, electric lights. It was a level of care that must have seemed absolutely impossible for an enemy soldier.
And here are the cold, hard consequences of these two systems, boiled down to a single, horrifying number. 35.8%. More than 1 in every 3 German prisoners in Soviet hands never made it home. That's over 1 million men who were captured alive and simply perished in captivity.
The American number is just as staggering, but for the complete opposite reason, a mortality rate of less than 1%. When you put these two numbers side by side, you see the life or death outcome of that geographic lottery we talked about at the beginning.
Now, for those who did survive, the end of the war in May 1945 wasn't the end of their story, not by a long shot. For hundreds of thousands of them, the journey home was still years away, and their experiences would end up shaping the post-war world in ways nobody could have predicted.
This timeline is just, well, it's remarkable. Within about a year and a half of the war ending, pretty much every German POW was gone from American soil. But the last prisoners in the Soviet Union, they didn't get home until 1956, a full 11 years after the war was over. Think about that, an entire childhood.
And these experiences left deep, permanent marks. The humane treatment in America was so profound that thousands of former prisoners actually chose to immigrate there after the war. On the other side, the survivors of the Soviet camps became the most powerful anti-communist voices in West Germany, basically making the new country immune to Soviet influence. And the lessons from both sides led directly to creating stronger protections for prisoners in the updated 1949 Geneva Conventions. Ultimately, what this all points to is a concept that some historians call a civilizational victory. It's this idea that a true victory isn't just about destroying an enemy's army on the battlefield. It's about proving the strength and superiority of your own values by how you treat the people you've defeated. It's a test of national character.
You know, there's a fountain in Texas at the site of a former POW camp that was built by the German prisoners themselves. It's still there today. And it's not a monument to war or conquest. It's this quiet, beautiful symbol of humanity and creation in a place where you'd least expect to find it. It's a legacy of building something, not just of destruction.
And that really is the whole heart of this story. The choices that were made in those camps, far away from any fighting, arguably said more about the character of these nations and the kind of world that would come after than any single military victory ever could.
So it leaves us with a really fundamental question, doesn't it? Is a civilization measured by its power to conquer? Or is it measured by its capacity for mercy, even in the face of incredible hatred? The story of these two worlds suggests the real answer lies in the latter, a lesson from the past that is still profoundly important today.